English summary. Given more than 2 centuries of scientific work in the field, the common ancestor of all Germanic languages has been thoroughly determined and described. This language, generally called Proto-Germanic in the English-speaking literature and Urgermanisch in German, is today fairly well known and understood, although no original texts have survived. Up until today, however, no comprehensive study has been carried out on the immediately preceding language, which was spoken in Scandinavia and the northern parts of Central Europe during the Bronze Age and the early Iron Age around 500 BC. This fact is somewhat surprising, especially as the scientific community has been quite well informed for many years concerning the stages of linguistic developments before and after this era. As early as 1960, the famous linguist Hans Krahe reported this lacuna, and this book now seeks to fill the gap. Part 1 of this book summarizes the main ideas and focal points of this work and moreover provides a brief overview of the very limited historical and much broader archaeological knowledge of the subject period, e.a. the first millennium BC. In this context, some problems of the cooperation between linguists and archaeologists are also discussed. For example, in Germany, scientific studies related to the Germanic tribes were distorted and abused by a strong nationalist movement during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, and even more so by the Nazi regime during the years 1933 and 1945. After that, an excessive reaction against all things Germanic took place. This cesura not only led to a correction of misunderstandings and mistakes, but in an obvious act of overreaction, virtually any cooperation between linguists and archaeologists has been interrupted in Germany for about half a century. As a part of this overreaction, some most promising fields of linguistic work, especially the systematic examination of toponyms, were neglected and also abandoned for many years, and even after such work was resumed, historians and archaeologists often failed to benefit from a comprehensive perception of new and relevant results of international linguistic research. Still, in part 1, some definitions are made. In German-speaking literature, the term Urgermanisch is generally used to describe the proto-language of all historical and living Germanic languages. The word Protogermanisch is not very much in use, so we coined it here in a specific sense to mean Proto-Germanic before the first sound shift. More precisely, we refer to the Germanic language before the 3 characteristic changes which are generally used to define Germanic in contrast to later Western and the European. The noted changes include the Germanic sound shift, Grimm's law, Werner's law, and the change of accentuation to the first syllable. To make the difference fully clear, the well-established term Urgermanisch, meaning Proto-Germanic, in English scientific literature is modified here to Spät-Urgermanisch, late Proto-Germanic, abbreviation SPG, and an acronym. Thus, in a nutshell, the term Proto-Germanisch, as used here in the sense of an archaic Proto-Germanic language, sometimes referred to as pre-Proto-Germanic or simply pre-Germanic in English-speaking linguistic literature, whereas the term Spät-Urgermanisch is used in the traditional sense of Proto-Germanic in English-speaking books. These more formal issues are closely related to the material questions and the discussion in part 2, which covers the Proto-Germanic phonological system and where the ongoing debates in regard to dating the sequence of the change due to Grimm's law and Werner's law are resumed. In the first half of the 20th century already, the traditional dating of the Germanic sound shift at around 500 BC, or only a little later, has been challenged in favor of a later date based on sound evaluation of the earliest known lexical material. This view is shared in this book, and some new arguments are given in favor of it. For example, the Latin spelling gimbri or tonique, not gimbri with an H, gimbri or tonique, is a strong argument in favor of the assumption that during the 1st century BC, Grimm's lore has still been productive, at least in the western parts of the lands inhabited by Germanic tribes. Further arguments are provided by the Latin name of river Vai, one of the estuaries of the Rhine River. The Latin term was originally spelled Vacalus by Caesar, but 150 years later was written Ahais with an H, Ahais, by Tacitus. Some further evidence can be seen in the tribe names Erosos, Aimanos, and Ushipeti. To the extent we suppose Germanic and not Celtic origin of these names, which Caesar explicitly characterizes to be of Germanic and not Celtic origin. Furthermore, the famous conqueror and author tells about a Germanic tribe called Tencteri, not Tencteri. Yet Caesar also reports names which clearly seem to have passed the Germanic sound shift, so the picture remains ambiguous. There is, however, reasonable evidence for the proposition that this sound shift was completed not earlier than the 1st century BC, at least in the West. The second basic question is the chronological order of the four fundamental changes under discussion. 1a. Aspiration of the newest P, T, and K. 1b. Germanic sound shift. 2nd. Werner's law. And 3rd. Change of accent. The traditional view of this sequence is just as stated here: 1a, 1b, 2, and 3. But if we assume the effects of Werner's law to have occurred after the aspiration of the news, but before the sound shift, we might also say before the rest of the sound shift, since the aspiration of P, T, and K may be seen as the first stage of this change. Thus 1a, 2, 1b, and 3. Then the combined change in Proto-Germanic consonant system becomes more organic and clear. As we show, the principle of Occam's razor is in favor of this sequence, and an additional difficult problem in the linguistic history of Proto-Germanic is solved at least in part using this assumption. The very rapid changes of Proto-Germanic during the final decades BC appear less dramatic than as the changes according to Werner's law might have occurred some generations earlier already. However, an important result of part 2 is that whatever opinion our readers might have in relation to these questions of dating and sequence, whereby the authors themselves by no means see their position as proven, the following chapters of this book remain valid in any case. The way leading from Protogermanisch, earlier Proto-Germanic, to Spät-Urgermanisch, late Proto-Germanic, may be a bit different under the different standpoints, and the relevant dates may differ anywhere from about 2 to 3 centuries, while the results as such do not depend on either conviction. The core of the work is thus accomplished in part 3 and part 4, which each describe this morphological and syntactical system of the Proto-Germanic language as it was probably spoken during the Urnfeld and Hallstatt periods, and, as we believe, even during Latin. In part 3, the morphological system of Proto-Germanic is investigated, although it is written in the conventional style of other comparative Germanic grammars like Rahe, Ramat, 1981, Barmesberger, 1986. The focus of interest in the reconstruction of archaic Proto-Germanic, Protogermanisch, only when necessary. Forms in late Proto-Germanic, Spät-Urgermanisch are invoked. This part covers the declension and formation of substantives, vowel and consonant stems, the formation of adjectives, including their comparison and participles, the declension of pronouns, the numerals, the conjugation of strong and weak verbs, the athematic verbs, and the preterito presents, the later being of outstanding value for the understanding of the development of Proto-Germanic verbal system. In part 4, the syntax of Proto-Germanic is analyzed, including the use of cases, tenses, and moods, as well as word order. These investigations on syntax and style do not claim completeness. However, some quite archaic features of early Germanic are shown, which in most Germanic grammars have been neglected. Part 5 explains some basic features and developments of the Proto-Germanic lexical system, especially the process of replacing inherited Indo-European words by neologisms. At this point, the very theoretical reasoning of the preceding parts provides very vivid and tangible results. 3 highly conservative semantic areas are presented at a glance: kinship, terminology, anatomical terms, and the names of various animals, keeping in mind that the Proto-Germanic vocabulary is probably the best examined part of this reconstructed language. Part 5 does not try to establish any kind of competition to existing etymological books, but offers, on the basis of individual terms, an amount of additional insight in the way in which the subject language probably sounded when spoken. Part 6, on the other hand, provides something entirely new. Based on the given reasoning, some short texts in Proto-Germanic are presented: 2 fables, 1 poem, and the Christian Lord's Prayer. The fables and the poem have been chosen because of existing scientific versions of these texts in Proto-Indo-European and or late Proto-Germanic. The Lord's Prayer has been chosen for reconstruction since early versions exist in all Germanic languages, including Gothic, which helps significantly in terms of reconstruction. Finally, some short sayings and classical quotes are reconstructed in both variants of Proto-Germanic. Thus, the English-speaking reader has the unique chance to learn how to say things like a horse, a kingdom for a horse, or my home is my castle, in a language predating Old Anglo-Saxon by anywhere from 800 to 1200 years. We hope this might be a practical help when meeting very old or very old-fashioned people. This was the English summary of the book Sprache und Herkunft der Germanen, Abriss des Protogermanischen vor der ersten Lautverschiebung by Wolfram Euler and Konrad Badenheuer. So the title is in English, the title Sprache und Herkunft der Germanen is of course language and origin of the Germanic language. Abriss des Protogermanischen vor der ersten Lautverschiebung, something like a short overview over the Proto-Germanic language before the first shift of the consonants, before Grimm's law. So if you're interested in all the stuff which is included, yeah, you need to know German, and then you can read this book, which is of course an interesting book you could read. But yes, of course, you need to know German on a very good level. Otherwise, you can forget it.